I've been studying media and entertainment since I was 7 years old. And when it comes to African American media, the most popular books, films, and television shows all follow a certain narrative. And if you follow that certain narrative, in most of the stories, every character is some sort of victim. I can even go back as far as, stuff like Roots, and you will always see everything following this narrative. Most of these films, they're popular for this following reason. Anything that presents this Afro American Negro as a victim, African Americans will go out and support it wholeheartedly. If you look at all the films, again, all the films, all the books, all the TV shows, they all follow this narrative to the letter. And this is the narrative of your white liberal. And this is what he wants you to see yourself as, some sort of victim of white supremacy and racism, and that you need his help in order to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and become some semblance of human. And this is what's presented in most of your African American media. And I have seen it in every movie and TV show that I have ever watched. And, no one has ever presented any sort of counterpoint to it. And whenever you, no, I'm wrong right there. When you do present a counterpoint to it, none of the Negroes will ever make an effort to go out and support it. Now, first case in point is director Ava DuVernay. This is just a recent case. When she produced this film, I Will Follow, which features a black woman who is trying to deal with the grieving of her aunt, over the death of her aunt that she loves so much. This movie was critically acclaimed, but when it came down to going out to support it, the Negroes did not go out and support this movie. This was a very good movie, very great movie, but because it does not follow the narrative of victimization, no one went out to go out and see this movie or support it in full force. Case but in contrast, when Ava DuVernay comes out with Selma, a movie that follows civil rights and the narrative of the March on Selma, all of a sudden Negroes want to go out and support this movie. Negroes want to go out and see this movie, and Negroes got all upset when this movie got snubbed by the Oscars. And in that case of selective outrage, it pretty much showed me, you know, again, the narrative of this Negro. Anything that presents the Negro as a victim, they are right there to support it, put all their money into it, and then sit there and then talk about there is people being racist against Ava DuVernay by not nominating her for an Oscar or giving her praise and accolades. But why not give her praise and accolades for this movie, which tells a humanized story of African American people? Why no NAACP Image Award for this movie? Why no praise from black people for this movie? I'll tell you why. Because again, it does not follow the narrative of your white liberal or the narrative of the Negro. And another case in point is this movie, The Great Debaters, another critically acclaimed African movie which features African Americans. This movie died at the box office, and it's one of Denzel Washington's best movies, one of the best movies he's ever directed. Beautiful cinematography, rock solid screenplay, great acting. Negroes did not go to see this movie. Again, why? Because it does not fit the narrative of the Negro. Nothing. The whole thing is that the narrative of the Negro. There was nobody here talking about being a victim. This was about people overcoming the racism that's in front of them. Black people trying to move themselves forward, and black people doing the best they can in a racist situation, and showing the positive side of black people as they went to take themselves to the next level. No one wanted to go see this movie. And again, the reason why, because it does not fit the narrative of the Negro. The Negro's narrative, again, is victimization, and anything that does not fit into that narrative, Negro will not support. The third movie that the Negro did not support was Pride, another movie which was about black people overcoming odds and challenges presented to them. And yes, they faced racism, but instead of them being victims, they went and tried to find a solution. The Terrence Howard character in this movie turned a negative into a positive. He was a college-educated man. He could not find a job. They put him in this place that was about to close, and he created a successful swim team And what was sad was no one wanted to support this movie. When it comes down to these type of movies and this type of media, no one wants to step up. Black people will sit there and say, we need these type of images these days, but when you look at their box office and you look at the demographics, they're not there. Fourth example is your Black Dynamite. Again, another great movie produced by Michael Jai White and directed by a black director. Let me look at his name, Scott Sanders. Um, Another film black people say that they another black film with a positive image. This was a satire and a parody of black exploitation movies, and a very well done one. But again, could not find support from Negroes at the box office. It has a cult following now, but it could not find support at the box office. But again, that's because again, it presents a different type of humor than your toilet humor, and it requires critical thinking for people to understand. And it also, again, does not follow the narrative of the Negro and the white liberal. And what I'm finding that's really interesting is that if you don't follow this narrative, you can't find any success with support with African Americans or even some with African Americans, because they're the ones who will sit there and lambast you and tell you that there's something wrong with this project. But meanwhile, the same Negroes will go out and spend $50 million to watch a movie like No Good Deed featuring a stereotypical black group, or they will go out and watch a show like Empire, um, and make it one of the top-rated shows of the year, or they'll go watch a show like Scandal and make it the top show of the year, and they'll even have parties for shows like Empire and Scandal. In other cases, other things that follow the narrative of victimization, because I work in publishing, and they'll go out and buy a book like A Waiting to Exhale or one of these other numerous street lit books, or books like from Zane, and they'll sit there and they'll tell you, that we need more positive images, but then you go out in droves and go buy this. And the reason why they buy it is because it, again, follows the narrative of the white liberal, and it follows the narrative of the Negro. It all promote the narrative of victimization. And in all of these stories, every time you see it, the Negro is presented as a victim. I mean, things like your Tyler Perry movies. I can even go there. Black woman is presented as a victim of someone. Anything that talks about personal responsibility, personal ownership, Negro does not want to support that type of content. Anything that talks about, you know, people doing for themselves or finding a solution to their problems, Negro doesn't want to support it. Negro will find excuses. He'll come up with you and tell you that that's not black, that's not black. I know I repeated that time again, but I was just thinking about what I was going to say. But they'll tell you that this is not black. But the irony is, those are the concepts that we have followed ever since, even during slavery. And that sad part is nobody wants to support these type of stories. Any story that is about either slavery or the civil rights movement, the Negro will go out and support in full force. And the only reason why they support it is because in both of those instances, you can present the Negro as a victim. Any other story outside of the Cosby Show, in that small window, any story, they don't want to support it. They don't want to see it. You present this Negro as a victim, you're guaranteed to make at least $50 to $100 million off him. Case in point, your Tyler Perry, your movie No Good Deed, any of Oprah Winfrey's projects, Lee Daniels with Precious and Monsters Ball. You present this Negro as a victim, you're guaranteed $50 to $100 million at the box office. You present humanized images of African Americans, you're not going to make any money. That's the sad, horrible truth that I've learned, that you're only going to have to deal with a small audience when it comes down to these type of things, because this is the narrative of the Negro. He's following the narrative of the white liberal to the letter. And when we look at his actions, this is the narrative that he follows. This is the type of media he supports. Anything that presents him as a victim, he is ready there with his money in hand, ready to spend it. And whenever you present a humanized image of him, he will run away from it like Superman and Kryptonite. I mean, I remember when I was promoting this book on my blog, I got told that the characters were too light-skinned. Here I am, a publisher of African American fiction, but I get told the characters are too light for them to buy the book. But I understand that it's not about the characters being light skinned, it's about the image that I'm presenting. I'm presenting an image that does not fit the narrative of this white liberal. And when you don't present images that present the narrative of the white liberal, the Negro is repulsed by it because they know that when you see an image like this, it's the equal of an image of a white person, and they don't want to be the equal of a white person. They want to be in the victim position because, again, they believe that the victim is a position of power, and they believe that they can overcome by remaining in the victim position, and that people will eventually, pull them up and put them at the same level. Not understanding that when you have somebody pull you up, they're not going to put you on the same level as they are. Especially this white liberal. The white liberal is never going to put you on the same level that he's on. You have to you have to create your own standard and put yourself on your own level. And this is something that many Negroes just don't want to do because, again, many of them are cowards, many of them are scared, and they're afraid that if they move to this level, they won't have that crutch of racism and white supremacy to stand on. And the truth is, you can do better without that crutch. You can actually move yourself to a higher level. And this is just something I have noticed and observed in American media, and I've noticed with the actions of African Americans. When you present them with humanized images, they are repulsed by them. But when you present them with a narrative of victimization, then people want to praise people. Like in the case of, director Ava DuVernay, when she made this movie, I Will Follow, no Negro wanted to talk about it. But when she makes Selma, everybody wants to talk about it. Same thing with director Steve McQueen. When he was making black films that featured humanized images of African Americans, nobody knew who he was. But when he makes 12 Years a Slave, every Negro wants to go and see this movie at the box office. He's praised as a hero. And the reason why they praise him, is because he's following the narrative of the white liberal. When he followed that narrative, you would guaranteed success. Same thing with, you know, many of these other actors. When you present those type of images to African Americans, the African American, almost like in a Pavlovian response, will take that as a normal. But when you present them with a humanized image, they pretty much run away. And it shows you, the complete cognitive distortion many Negroes have regarding their own image. They don't, I think many Negroes just don't see themselves as human beings, and they're afraid to see themselves on an equal level. Now, this is a major challenge for me as a publisher of positive African American fiction. I'm trying to find ways to overcome it, and it's a big challenge for me. I'm going to say it because the biggest challenge for me in selling African American fiction, featuring humanized images, like those on ISIS, Night of the Vampires, um, East Team Undercover, or even critically acclaimed books like All About Marilyn and All About Nikki, is that black people, when they see their own image, sadly, they get repulsed by it. And when I produce a book with no image on it of an African American like the Thetas, more people are more responsive to it. And it shows me, how how much work I have to do in trying to try to change this image of African Americans. Because it's sad that one of the better selling books that I did with African Americans has no image of an African American, and that every time I put an image of an African American on a cover, I have to deal with people getting upset and wanting to argue with me and getting into straw man debates about light skin and dark skin. When you look at, this is a person who is trying to produce images that are positive, humanized, and are going to put black people in a positive light. And it's sad that 50, 60, 75 years after Johnson Publications has come out with magazines like Ebony and Essence to elevate the image of African Americans, we still have African Americans who, when they see their own image, get offended and get upset and do not want to see themselves, on the same level as a white person. whenever you present that type of image to black people, they get offended. And I think they get offended because they start to see that, you know, the closer we get to true equality, there is no more crutch of victimization for them to stand under. And if people start buying, images like these or images like these of black women, then that means that there is no more crutch of victimization to stand under, and that people are moving past this narrative of the white liberal, which is, the Negro is a victim, the Negro needs to be, you know, helped and cleaned up and made into this halfway decent human being, and then instead he's saying that he's creating his own standard for blackness and his own black identity, and he's creating his own standard, and he's finding his own thing, and he doesn't need to depend on this white liberal to clean him up and fix him. And that means that there's actual progress. And then you have Negroes who will hold on to this narrative of victimization, until they die, because they want to remain in the victim position. They believe that the victim position is a position of power, and it truly is not a position of power, as I have said in numerous videos. The victim position is a position of weakness. It means that people are controlling you, people are dictating the terms to you, and that you have to take whatever they give you, whatever crumbs they give you from the table. When you create your own narrative and you create your own standards, what you're doing is saying that, you're not a victim, you're a survivor. And when you're in the survivor position, you start dictating your own terms, and you start recreating your own standards, and you start taking the lead in taking control of your own life. And I believe that, in the next 50, 60 years, the greatest challenge for African Americans won't be with dealing with just white supremacy. I don't believe that that's going to be the issue. I believe the biggest issue we're going to have is inside the race, because the greatest enemy to the Negro is the Negro. And, his problems are, they have to do with him not liking himself, not loving himself or herself, not seeing his own image as human, and not trying to create their own standard. Now, every other race that comes into America, they have their own standards for culture, their own standards for art, their own standards for history, and they create their own standards. But the Negro, he's still getting his narrative dictated to him by white liberals, and that's what's really messed up. That's what's really distorting his image of self. He's not creating his own image of self. He's allowing others to create it for him, and that's preventing him from growing as a human being. That's all I have to say for this video. You can find all of these great movies like I Will Follow, Black Dynamite, Pride, The Great Debaters on Amazon. And you can find great books that I publish, like All About Maryland and All About Nikki in paperback on Amazon.com. All About Maryland is on Kindle Unlimited, and you can borrow this if you have Amazon Prime. And you can find the new ISIS Night of the Vampires in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. And you can find East Team Undercover on paperback and in Kindle Unlimited. All four of these books are great reads for African American children and adults. They present a positive image of African Americans. And also the Thetas is also available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. And you can borrow that if you have Amazon Prime. All five of these books, again, are positive stories about African American girls and African American people. They present the most balanced and positive image of African American women as I see it. And I'm urging you to go out and pick up these books. Again, if you have Amazon Prime, you can get them for free. And I have a lot of great books on my Amazon page. You just click the link in the description box, and you'll find a whole bunch of positive African American fiction, and even some nonfiction like my Simp trilogy. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.